Estás viendo el programa deportivo de Mc&T on CHCO-TV. Y ahora, aquí hay dos tipos que me obligarán a leer esta introducción en español, Ivan y Jose.
I'm Joe Ticotsky down in New Haven, Connecticut.
I'm Evan McFarlane here in St. Andrews, New Brunswick.
And you're watching episode 81 of Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. I have no idea how Mark's opening ended up being all in Spanish. Evan, did you hit the SAP button on your TV remote or something?
See, Jose.
We're all getting the
Hey,
bilingual
fun fact,
stuff.
Joe. The only A+ I ever got in university was in intro Spanish. I took it all with all the athletes at UMB, and it was basically it saved me. I think it got me out of academic probation.
Oh, man. I want to congratulate you and the Canada team on that Four Nations Cup. What a final.
That's got to be tough for you to say. I know that's a tough one, but we, like you said, we didn't have any doubts we were going to win that game the entire time. I know a lot of people down your way say we needed that win, but we weren't worried.
Yeah, and it'll be awesome. I think the next time they're playing is 2029, where it'll be the Three Nations Cup, because you guys will be the 51st state, right? Oh, yeah, bad political humor.
Wild. I'm looking forward to the Olympics. I think the Olympics are going to be pretty crazy because of that. I don't know if we'll ever see an NHL All-Star game again, and I think this could actually change the landscape of every All-Star for every sport, because that was way more fun than watching a skills contest or whatever it is that we see in everything else.
It was
awesome. Best hockey game I've ever watched in my life.
It was excellent. Even a non-hockey fan, I enjoyed it. Quick music spotlight. There's a group called Campbell and Johnston's Black Market Band, and they have a song called Don't Leave Me Hanging. They're touring throughout Nova Scotia in April, so you can go to campbellandjohnstonmusic.com to check them out. After the break, we'll talk softball for the first time in our 5+ years on the air as we bring in another Olympic medal winner. You're watching Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV in St. Andrews. Welcome back to Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. Evan is out doing an investigative report on increased beer sales during the recent Four Nations Cup, so I'll be doing this segment solo. Our first guest is from Guelph, Ontario, about an hour west of Toronto, and most of her adult life has been dedicated to the sport of softball. As a catcher, she's been part of Team Canada since 2007, and this has taken her to 2 Summer Olympics, as well as a collegiate career in the United States, and now is an assistant coach at Top 10 Power Florida State. And she's also the head coach of Team Canada. So, from sunny Tallahassee, Florida, let's welcome in Kaleigh Rafter. Kaleigh, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's get rolling here. How did a young girl in Guelph, Ontario, first get involved playing softball, and what other sports did you play growing up?
Yeah, so my brother, I have an older brother who's 5 years older than I am, and he played baseball and basketball. So when I wanted to do everything that he did. So when I got into the age to play, needed something to do, my mom was big into make sure we get out and get you into some sports. So naturally, the things that I want to do were play baseball and basketball. So that's kind of how I got into it. But I played quite a bit through high school. I played everything I could. Sports was also a cool way. I love sports, all of them. I also thought it was cool that we got to miss school to go to sporting events. So anything that could get me out of a day of school, I was on the bus there. So I did cross country, I did some badminton, threw some javelin, threw some discus, played a little soccer, softball, basketball, volleyball. So whatever there was, I tried to go for it.
Now, when did you decide that you thought you were good enough to play collegiately in the U.S.?
Yeah, so I actually went all the way up. I actually went on a visit to Vermont for basketball. I was kind of deciding up until my last year what do I want to do, baseball or softball or basketball. And I thought just where I was at, I thought, I think I want to play softball in college. So that led me down a different path. But I think ever since I was probably getting into high school, I knew that playing in the US in college was one, a way for me to get my college possibly helped out or paid for. So I knew that could be a really good option for me. So I started in like ninth grade. I knew that I kind of wanted to go down there. So how do I maybe go down to some camps and get myself around some people and play on some teams that maybe back then we would travel to like one tournament in the US. So that
Yeah.
was a big thing. Now I know kids are going every weekend, but we would kind of go down to one or two tournaments. There was a tournament in Detroit. There was a tournament in Buffalo that we would go to, which wasn't too far for us. So that's kind of trying to get myself on some of those teams. But I kind of knew early on that I really wanted to pursue sports at a high level. Then it was just figuring out where that level was for me.
Detroit and Buffalo, two of the hot spots. Sorry,
Yeah.
Lions and Bills fans there, but
Yeah.
now you competed for Team Canada at the 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing. Team came in fourth. Then the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo, where you won a bronze. What was each Olympic experience like, especially given the fact they came 12 years apart?
Yeah, very different. If people remember the Beijing Olympics, it was kind of the first event that China had ever held in their country, kind of opening up the doors to the world. So it was like an amazing spectacular. They went above and beyond for everything, their facilities, the village, how they set it up. Like it was just one huge, the money they spent on it, unreal being there. And having that, I was a 20-year-old. I think I turned 21 at the Olympics, but I was a 21-year-old at the Olympics, the first time I've ever been there at this huge, huge spectacle, which was kind of this grandiose event. There was just a lot to take in. And then our team heartbreaking finish. We lose a tough game to Australia that knocked us out of medal contention. And then softball was taken out of the Olympics. So 12, stick with it. 12 years later, I decided, you know what, Tokyo is going to be my last run to that Olympics. Ended up being another year because of COVID. And then we had this second event that was a COVID event where it was like, did Japan really want to host it? Were we going to host it? Were we not going to host it? It was super strict protocols. There was no opening ceremonies for us. The village was very contained. It was not kind of the same spectacles. Really, really cool. They did a really great job with it, but a much more event where it was just our team in our little bubble, and we were kind of just going to work. So I got to see two very interesting Olympics. But it's kind of a cool experience at the end of my career when I've kind of have been all that. I think it was tough for some of our younger ones because they wanted that grandiose. At least I had that kind of one Olympic spectacle, which I think is really cool to be a part of. But then also on the backside, I kind of got one where it was really just about our team and about trying to bring home a medal that we had never done for Canada.
That's awesome. Now, you also played 2 seasons in the Japanese Professional Softball League. What was that experience like? And do you have any interesting kind of fish out of water Canadian and Japan stories?
Yeah, I mean, they were great. It was a great experience. I played for a team called Honda, which was we worked. So the girls on the team actually worked for the company, and then they would come out to practice in the afternoon. We didn't have to go to work. We just would come out to practices. But we'd a lot of times go to dinners on the road. So we would play on weekends, and we would always go to these restaurants, and you would sit on the ground. And it was I'm 6 feet tall, and I don't love sitting, but their tables would be really low. And I would just see when we walk in, I'm like, please be a chair table, please be a chair. And it would just be the one on the ground. And I know I've got an hour of just kind of trying to figure out how to sit and not be uncomfortable. And they would try to like help me out, let me try to stretch my legs out. But they're so used to, they can sit cross-legged because they do it in school and they do it their whole lives. But for them to sit on the ground for 2 hours and just be cross-legged is completely normal to them. And those are just the days we walk in and be like, oh, this is the one restaurant I don't want to have. But it was great. My experience was awesome.
Free car? You get a free car?
No, we didn't get they all had to get Hondas, but we were driven. It was on the other side of the road, so they didn't let us drive over there. And public transport was so good, so we had a translator who would pick us up, and then we could use the public transport if we wanted to go on any excursions.
There you go. All right. So while you're now an assistant coach at Florida State, you're also the coach of Canada's national team. What happens between now and the 2028 Olympics in terms of tryouts, preparation?
Yeah. So we'll go our season for Canada usually rolls a little bit more in the summertime. So we're kind of on May through August is our really heavy time, and then we'll have off-season training camp. So which lines up pretty well for me being at Florida State. We kind of our main season runs September through May. So there's a little bit of overlap. Thankfully the coaches here are super supportive of letting me go in the summertime and do the Canada thing. So it's just a balancing act. Probably not a lot of sleep between now and 2028, but just trying to balance it. And then eventually we'll kind of flip right now I'm probably about 50-50. And then as we get closer to 28 and hopefully a qualification for the Olympics, that kind of will start to shift a little bit more towards a little heavier Canada schedule, because we'll start training quite a bit more. But it's just balancing the off season. We actually have some girls. We have 3 players down right now that are down training, so they kind of come down in small groups, and I try to just balance everything both. But yeah, just managing it both, and then as we get closer, it'll be a little bit heavier of a Canada schedule.
Okay, now the Olympics are taking place in LA, but tell us why the softball competition will be 1,300 miles away.
Yeah. I don't know for sure, but I'd be willing to bet some money that it was just the event space. So to have a softball event, there's pretty specific specifications on how big the field has to be. Land in LA is not cheap, so to get a 50 to 100 acre parcel of land to build a stadium in LA, it would have been so much money. When they have a little bit of a flight away now, they have a different spot that's going to be completely ready to host an event like that. So I believe they're doing baseball at the Dodgers Stadium. How we were able to do it in Japan is that their baseball stadiums we played on were turf, so they could put in a softball field and put up a temporary fence and essentially stage a softball event at a baseball arena. The problem, I think, in Southern California is all the baseball fields there are natural grass. So it's not like you can ask, hey, Anaheim Angels, can you tear up your infield and put some turf down so we can host a softball event? We can kind of play in the grass infield. So I think it was just a little bit of cost and availability and land out there that they didn't have. So if the option was to not have a softball event at the Olympics or have a softball event and played in Oklahoma City, I think a lot of us would definitely choose the Oklahoma City route.
Okay, so it's in Oklahoma City, which
Oklahoma
is also
City,
where the College World Series
yeah,
is.
it'll be the same. Yeah. So they already have they'll probably get it to about 15,000, I would say. So it'll be a 15,000 seat stadium in an area that really loves softball. So I think it should be a good showing and a really good fan experience being out there.
Yeah. Couldn't the Dodgers have signed like one less free agent and built you
Maybe. Yeah.
specific?
Getting it back though.
Yeah.
I can only imagine if Shohei rolled an ankle on some turf, it would be.
Yeah. Well, that would be great. All right. Well, lastly, I'd read somewhere you were asked if you could spend an hour with anyone in the world, living or dead, who would it be? And you said UConn women's basketball coach Gino Auriemma, a man and program is near and dear to my heart here. Explain why he was your choice.
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up watching. I was just a fan of sport, and I think he was to me one of the first like true dynasties. I know the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq, who kind of won something like he built a dynasty and kind of did something before anyone else in college sports or college athletics did. I know John Wooden had his days back, but like in the modern era to me, he kind of built something that was pretty amazing. And what they did in the early 2000s, almost all the way. I mean, I know in the past few years, it hasn't lived up to what the expectations are in stores, but they're competing every year. And that kind of, I remember watching Diana Taurasi in that group and just the players he had and the longevity that he had with success kind of coming in after Pat Summitt there with Tennessee, and just kind of taking it over. And I think he really, those teams changed the game. You see the South Carolinas now and the Baylors that had their little bit of a run there. Like he changed the game and he forced the game of basketball to adapt, women's basketball to adapt. And it's just completely leveled up where women's basketball is at now. So I don't know if you have the Caitlin Clarks and where it is and the support you have if you don't have kind of the UConn in the early 2000s. So I think just the ability to build that one and sustain it is pretty impressive just from a fan and then also a coach. So it would definitely be a cool one to sit down and see what he did.
Yeah, and he is one of the funniest guys you would ever want to meet.
Yeah, you can tell in his interviews. He's straightforward. He doesn't mess around. He'll tell you like it is. He's okay.
He does
Saying
mixes the old school and the new school very well.
Yes.
All right. Well, she is Team Canada softball coach Kaleigh Rafter, and you can catch her team throughout the season on the ACC network, ESPNU, and ESPN Plus as they make their march towards the ultimate destination, the Women's College World Series in late May. Kaleigh, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Well, after the break, it's time for another edition of Small Town Spotlight, and we'll head to a famous New Brunswick record store. So, kids, you can now Google the word record before the segment airs so you know what the heck we're talking about. You're watching Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV, and to date ourselves even more, we'll be back before the needle hits the groove. Welcome back to Mc&T Sports Report and our latest Small Town Spotlight segment. Anyone who came of age in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s certainly had a favorite record store. It could have been part of a local department store or a big national chain like Tower Records, HMV, or Strawberries. But it was most likely a local place where you bought your vinyl. Where I grew up in Connecticut, we had Music Box, Merle's Record Rack, and of course, Cutler's. Throughout Canada, you had A&A Records and Sam the Record Man, and even in Iceland, you have Lucky Records in Reykjavik. On my first visit to New Brunswick back in 2014, I was wandering around St. John and stumbled into a great little hole-in-the-wall record shop called Backstreet Records, and I struck up a conversation with Gordy, the longtime owner, trading stories about concerts we had seen and records we had purchased. Last year, after 44 years, Gord sold the store in St. John, as well as the one in Fredericton, where you have to walk up the big flight of stairs just to get in. He sold his stores to Taz Records, who have three stores in Nova Scotia. Despite all the changes, as well as the advent of digital music, records are somehow more popular than ever. So let's take a few minutes to chat with Jud Crandall, manager of Backstreet Records in St. John, now part of the Taz family of record stores. Jud, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
So Gordy Tufts owns the place for 44 years, and then Taz Records from Nova Scotia approaches him about buying the two stores. Were you surprised when you heard about it, and any trepidation on your end that it would work out?
I was surprised in as much as it was big news that came out of the blue. But I know Gord, he didn't have any real retirement plans per se. He had often said, more often since the sale, but I know leading up to it, you'd hear little inklings, but he would look at retiring either after 45 years of the shop. We celebrated our 33 and a third anniversary back in 2013, I think. So his benchmarks were like, I'm going at 45, or I'm going to like make it into my 70s, and then we'll see what's happening. And so Taz kind of came out of the blue just by chance as well around this time. And, you know, it's owning a small business that you've put your life into. It's, you know, when you get a good offer, it's an offer you can't refuse.
Yeah.
A lot of guys leave businesses like this just, you know, and lock the door or like sell it to someone probably like myself, and I take a million years to pay them off, or the business closes like a year later or something.
Now, these days, it's so easy to just pop open your laptop, browse a record selection online, and order something. What do you think makes Backstreet Records so special and keeps people coming into the store, besides seeing Jud Crandall, of course?
There you go. Hopefully I don't know if they're coming in or walking on by, I don't know. But I mean, going back to like my own discovery of the store, like getting in there and, you know, finding the kind of things on the shelf that you didn't even know existed at the time. Like one thing that was real exciting for me in the 90s was finding like a bootleg tapes, getting like a Bad Religion and Nirvana bootlegs when I was a kid. And so, you know, there's always that there's always that aspect of like esoteric, ephemeral kind of stuff that you just can't get out of new vinyl. As much, everything's available on new vinyl, which is wonderful nowadays. And definitely, there's a good thrill of the hunt there, but like finding, like used records, like, rare kind of CDs as nowadays as well, CDs as well as records, having the experience of like digging through a crate and seeing what finds you, I think is a big thing.
All right. So what are some of the more unique, valuable records that you have in the store?
One of the recent ones we got in, and I appreciate you sending me the article about this one. I didn't get a chance to check it out yet. But Leroy Stevens, 74 Screams, I think, or 74 Recorded Screams. I forget the exact title. Kind of a wonderful piece of record collecting ephemera where the sound artist went to all the record stores in Manhattan. This was back in 2009, collected all the recommendations for the best screams on record. So now you got a 500-piece pressing of these 74 screams ranging from Iggy Pop to Buddy Holly, bit of reggae in there as well, all kinds of foolishness. And you got them back to back on one side in about 3 minutes, and then like spaced out with time between if you want to sample the individual screams, I guess, or enjoy them over about 15 minutes. We have a random horse racing one as well that's kind of near and dear to my heart. That's from the 70s. It's 4 LPs, computers involved somehow in the process to make sure like every time you want to put on one of those records and like place bets on the race, you're going to get a randomized outcome. And that's still sealed in the shrink wrap and manufactured by a small Quebec company. So that's
horse racing?
Yeah, horse racing. You want to play the ponies at home, you can like get this 4 LP set. Like I said, it's sealed, so all the game sheets are in there. Whoever decides to put their hands on this, might be me one day if it doesn't sell, because I'm quite curious about it. But yeah, apparently it's randomized, so it'll go into different grooves every time you put it on, and you can get up to, I can't remember, but up in the hundreds, different random potential results. So
wow.
Yeah, and so so as you can appreciate, those are two things that are like not conventional music pieces. So, definitely more things that are going to be picked up by fans of like gaming, ephemera, like weird regional pressings, people who are interested in sound art, someone who might be a campus radio DJ. So those would be the two oddest things I think we have in stock right now.
Okay. Now, how about your favorite record that you own?
Oh yeah, I when I would go on campus radio, I worked in campus radio for about 17, 18 years. And on one of our conference trips to Winnipeg, I would often look up, I always look up the record stores and the microbrews and the comic shops before I'd look at the conference schedule. And so in Winnipeg, I got a compilation for Prince Buster's Record Shack. Gotta be like hard to tell when the pressing was, because it's definitely a local pressing. It's not even quite circular. It's a little bit of an oval shape. And but it's got the stamps on the record for Prince Buster's Record Shack on Orange Street in Kingston, Jamaica. And it's a whole collection of his recordings from the late 50s and early 60s. And even the liner notes on the back are, they celebrate like the good old times, the golden oldies. So I assume it's maybe a later 60s, early 70s pressing. But then it takes a hard turn into a real fire and brimstone condemnation of anyone who's out to disrupt the good times, and it gets it's like the book, it's a quite cheery Hallmark, sort of oldies celebration for about 3 paragraphs, and then the last sentence is like, suddenly you're in the book of Revelations, and he's like warning the condemnation of anyone who's not into this. So,
yeah, that's certainly
that's that's the sort of thing, like someone bought that in Jamaica at that shop, say late 60s, early 70s, and then through whatever sequence of events, it's found its way to a crate in Winnipeg and into my collection. And so that's definitely near the top of the list for my personal thing.
Yeah, that's another thing that, unfortunately, people who don't have vinyl, just reading the liner notes. I remember up, before MTV and things like that, and I remember buying a Queen album and saying, that's what Freddie Mercury looks like. I mean, you just never saw people But all right, just a pivot before we finish up away from music, which I always ask all of our guests. You're in St. John. Give a shout out to your favorite non-chain restaurant.
There's a great brew pub in town called Big Tide. I'd have to look up when they started, but they've been going for a good 20 years, if not longer. Before that, they had roots in a place called Taps, which is also a long-running brew pub in town. But yeah, I got to give a shout out to Big Tide. Those guys were doing growlers before they were a thing for anyone. The beer there is great. The food's great. Just good old, it's like comfort pub food. And, there's certainly like more like haughtier restaurants in town. Like there's the restaurant scene in town has blossomed quite a lot over the last 20 years, but Big Tide is, like comfort food, or anytime I have the chance to pick a place to go for a birthday or for some kind of engagement, it's, I got to go to Big Tide, man. I love that place.
Good stuff. Well, he is Jud Crandall, manager of Backstreet Records in St. John. You can check them out online at tazrecords.com and on Instagram at BackstreetSJ. But the best way is to take a trip to 124 Germain Street in the Port City, climb up the little side street, and enter their amazing little store. Jud, thanks so much for talking records in general and about the store, and for coming on the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot. Always a pleasure. Talk to you later.
And we are back. Cool interview with Jud of Backstreet Records. Evan, where did you buy your records when you were growing up in the mean streets of St. Andrews?
I know it's tough for you, Joe, because you are getting up there in age, but I'm actually I'm a little younger than records. Haven't bought my first record yet. Oddly enough, I did get a record player for Christmas, so I need to start that collection going pretty quick. I do remember the first cassette that I was given, though, as a kid.
Okay, well, what was it?
Do I have to say?
Go for it.
I was a huge Elvis Presley fan as a young child. I used to dance around, and I thought I had blue suede shoes, and I was a hound dog, and my parents brought me back a cassette from one of their trips one time.
Oh, my goodness. We need to find some still photos or something of that.
What about you? What was your first one? Was it etched on the wall?
Yeah, it was hieroglyphics. I had 2 45s that I bought at Caldor's department store for 67 cents each. In one, it was pretty cool, Me and Mrs. Jones by Billy Paul. And the other one, I Am Woman by Helen Reddy. How embarrassing is that? Oh, good God. Oh, the old days. All right, well, we are out of time. That's it for episode 81 of Mc&T Sports Report. I am Joe in New Haven.
I've been here in New Brunswick.
Thanks to Patrick Watt and Florence Mitchell for producing and editing a show whose ratings have gotten a lot hotter lately, mostly due to climate change. Thanks for watching. This is Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV in St. Andrews.